Hey folks, this is my first time doing this. So how many in here have ever had to come out to your parents as gay? Yeah? None of you? Okay. Anyway, I'm from the South, originally North Florida, and in the late 80s, I had to come out to my parents because it was just time and everybody was like pressuring me. So I went to my mom and I had all these religious barriers to go through. So every time I told her, she took it as a prayer request. And she's like, let's not tell your dad. I'll talk to him and I'll tell you what happens. You just get on back to college and I'll deal with it. So later on I find out after like a few months, I'm like, well, what'd he say? She's like, well, I didn't tell him. I just couldn't. I mean, he's better off if you just leave him over in his recliner. He's happy watching Archie Bunker. He doesn't need to know all this stuff. I was like, well, what have you been doing for 3 months? She's like, well, I talked to my preacher, and we've been checking into some plans and some healing things, and you can go to this place. And I'm like, no. You've met me. I don't do anything you tell me to. I never have. I want to tell Dad. She's like, okay, I'll tell him. You go on back to college. It's like we went through this again. Finally, I got really frustrated. I was like, I need to take control over this. So I wrote this form letter, and I got the list. I just graduated from undergrad. And I got the list that we had sent out all my graduation invitations, which is like 100 people we knew, including my parents' pastor. So I wrote this it was a very simple, witty form letter that said, hey, in case y'all were wondering, I'm gay. I signed it, said thank you, put it all in there, and sent 100 of them out. So once it trickled into the system, I got a phone call from my mom, and she's like, well, I'm really wanting to thank you because your daddy won't ever go back to church now because you told the pastor. And I was like, well, it's a 2-for-1 sale then, because he doesn't need to be going to listen to this guy, because this guy had been feeding my mom all this hateful stuff. And, you know, this is something that this was between us. This was between me and my creators. It had nothing to do with some crazy Baptist preacher that had gotten some kind of hate in his heart and wanted to make me some kind of poster child for his anti-gay stuff. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So, thank you. So anyway, eventually I had to go home and face my dad. And I found him there in the recliner. And we love to go out. He liked to take me to whatever he was working on out in the barn, and we would go out there and talk, and I knew that's what we would do. So I got there, and he was quiet. He's like, hey, I want to show you something. I've been building a shed out there next to the other barn you saw last time, and just come on out there. So I get out there, and I'm over-explaining and talking about the letter and apologizing and trying to compensate. And he just grunts every now and then. Like 2 grunts is no, 1 grunt is yes, a long grunt is maybe, and you don't know what he's saying. And I just went on and on and on, because I was bamboozled. I didn't know, like what is he going to say? I want to know. I don't want to hear from my mom and her pastor who speaks to her. I want to know what my dad thinks. So he said, you know, look over at look at that plumb line over there. And there's a plumb line. Do you know what a plumb line is? It hangs for building things. He said, it goes from the rafter down to the concrete they poured, and you can see they poured it 3 inches farther than they needed to, which cost me $75 more. And he said, go look at it, look up. He's like, He said, I haven't ever built a straight thing in my life. And then he said, what I need to know, son, is are we square? And I said, of course, we're square. So, thank you.